Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the weekly live stream for the Restitutor Orbis channel. I'm your host, Lucius Aurelian, and we are going to be looking at the United States Civil War, going back to the very peculiar Red River Campaign, or as I like to call it, going nowhere for no reason. I'd like to extend a welcome to all frequent viewers, all prime explorers, and all other viewers joining us for this very interesting exploration. And it's good to see everybody, Jamie, Adam, Carmichael, After the Trip Awake, Vaughn, My Bailiwick Zone, Reality Checkmate, Can of Dummy. Who else have we got? Vaughn, Chassis Nix, good to see you. Yeah, sorry about last weekend, Chassis. And hey, My Bailiwick Zone, good to see you. It is time now. So hey, Kathy, good to see you. And hey, Robert. And yes, once again, if anybody has an issue with me greeting people, too bad. So the Red River Campaign. Why is this very intriguing? Well, you might notice in this little map that we're looking at, and this shows the Western theater of the American Civil War, we can actually take a look and see exactly where the campaigns were going. Now, the Red River Campaign occurred off the map in Western Louisiana. The specific objective was the city of Shreveport. Now, this is in the spring of 1864. So this was after the significant battles of Gettysburg, after the Union had won Vicksburg and had cut the Confederacy in half. What's intriguing about the Red River Campaign is that at this time, we're trying to figure out, if the Civil War happened exactly as history tells us it did, then the Union was trying to destroy the armies of the Confederacy, although they were still executing what was called the Anaconda Plan from General Winfield Scott, where they were trying to starve the Confederacy into submission by blockades and then wearing down the population and its infrastructure. The Red River Campaign, though, involved an objective in Shreveport, which is very peculiar because you might notice that it's off the map. And in 1864, the main objectives, as we understood it, were Sherman's army going to Atlanta and then the march to Savannah, and then Grant trying to destroy Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia in the state of Virginia. That's what was going on. But the odd thing about this campaign is it involved a diversion of resources, quite a lot of resources, over to Louisiana. And looking a little bit closer here, we have this blow up of Louisiana. And if you're not familiar with it, we're actually focused on the northern part of the state, Shreveport. And the reason we're told that Shreveport was the Union Army's objective, and this was actually Army-Navy expedition, is that it was the capital of the Confederacy's Trans-Mississippi Department. Now, according to official history, Texas didn't have any significant battles occur within it, but it was one of the major supporters, obviously a Confederate state, and it provided manpower, equipment, horses, and many other things. There was also something else going on at that time. Hey, Random FX, good to see you. Yeah, the big squeeze, the Anaconda Plan, if you will. But hey, Cecilia, good to see you. Let me go in a little bit closer here and talk this through. So the Union Army's plan was actually drawn up by an individual named Henry Halleck, and he was the commander-in-chief of the Union Army before Grant took over. But a lot of people don't remember him because he wasn't exactly considered an effective chief. At least that's what we're told. Grant, of course, is remembered for winning the Civil War. The plan was as follows. The Union was going to attack with an Army-Navy expedition up the Red River. And the Army commander, who we'll talk about in a second, Nathaniel Banks, a very peculiar individual known to be a political general and not a very successful Union general. But it's another one of those situations kind of like Burnside, where you have somebody who keeps failing and they continue to be placed in greater positions of responsibility. And the explanation will be he was a political general. He was from Massachusetts. The naval commander was David Dixon Porter, who was considered a very competent naval commander. And the difficulty of this was their advance up the Red River. The Red River is very unpredictable, especially when you're trying to take what they called their riverboat ironclads. Now, the Union force was 30,000 total. It also included a significant corps from Sherman's force. And you might recall that Sherman had plans to move in and seize Atlanta. And so that corps was going to be needed, yet they were diverting 15,000 soldiers for this campaign in Louisiana. So oddly enough, when Grant did take command, he wanted that corps diverted back. He even wanted to cancel the operation. But guess what they did? They continued on with it, which is really odd because Grant was then commander-in-chief of the Union Army, or commanding general of the U.S. Army, whatever the different titles that he had. And for whatever reason, they pressed on with this campaign. So you have an incompetent Union Army commander who's lost many battles. The Confederates called him Commissary Banks because they defeated him so many times in the Shenandoah Valley campaign, as the official history goes. And they do significantly outnumber the Confederate force. Sometimes they say the Confederates were 6,000, a maximum of 15,000. But at no point during the campaign were they anywhere close to the Union forces. So a lot of strange things already going on. And what was the reason for going to Shreveport anyway? And you might see it down here in the comments, at least for the objectives that were given. Yeah, exactly. Persist and march on. And that seemed to be the plan at that time. And even though somebody could have changed it and it didn't make a lot of sense, the Union was going to drive on. And so what was actually going to happen with this? Well, let's look at Shreveport itself. Now, we're going to do an exploration of Shreveport coming up because it's a very interesting city in Louisiana. And we'll consider its tactical and operational importance to the Union. What we're informed of is that Shreveport, being on the Red River, it was the city where all the supplies coming from Texas could be facilitated to the Confederate cause. But it's really odd because at that same time, the Union had already seized control of the Mississippi. So what reason did they really have to go into Shreveport? It didn't really seem to make a lot of sense. The other objective was that they wanted to destroy the remaining Confederate forces in Louisiana. Seizing Shreveport would enable them to do that. There was also the presence of a lot of cotton in Shreveport. And this is what we're informed is the real reason why General Banks, the Union commander, brought along cotton speculators. I was surprised to learn, even when I first learned about this many years ago, that the Union mills in the North, namely Massachusetts and the other New England states, as we call them, weren't actually producing because they didn't have access to the cotton. And apparently, General Banks, who was a prominent politician from Massachusetts, wanted to provide them that cotton. And so they had cotton speculators, or basically cotton business people, as we'd call them today, that accompanied the army. And their mission was to seize all these bales of cotton that somehow, for some reason, were in Shreveport and send them back north. So what do you think of this for an objective? Very, very odd and very strange. Yeah, no doubt. Well, everybody likes talking about the Civil War. We'll wait till we get to the images from this one. So funny how it's depicted as a major border in old world maps. Yes, isn't it? And that's a very good call out right there. It often is. Thieves. No doubt about it, Jamie. No doubt about it. And that's the odd thing about it. I mean, whether you want to call it contraband or there was some reason behind it, if you actually read into the campaign, there's a lot of statements that both Union commanders, the admiral and the general, were all about bringing in and seizing the cotton. So very strange. Yes, RB, they were very concerned about fashion. You needed to make sure you got those mills going so you could have your really nice fancy uniform so then you could pose with your pictures, right? And then there's the last point about all this. And that comes down to the French intervention that was going on in Mexico at that time. Now, when you go north of Texas, a lot of U.S. history tends to neglect the fact that there was a French intervention in Mexico. And purportedly, the Confederacy was going to recognize this government that the French had installed in Mexico, although there was a legitimate Mexican government that was still resisting this government. We'll look into this in a second. Yeah, does it sound familiar? Liars, cheats, and thieves, and the robber barons? Yeah, and you might notice those are the same patterns that are occurring, even here in a military conflict with disciplined armies. So it's very, very odd, very peculiar. And you can look at this other map that shows it a little bit better, the actual conduct of the campaign. So remember that the Union had seized control of New Orleans earlier in the war, and they even had forces that were going to join down from Arkansas, although they never made it. They had logistics problems. Yes, imagine that, logistics actually stopping something in the 1800s. I couldn't believe it myself, but that's what the official account of the campaign says. So they didn't have their forces coming from the north, so it was just going to be Porter and Banks. Banks was the army commander, and then Porter was the naval commander, bringing the river ironclads up the river. So just think of this, 30,000 Union soldiers and then an entire naval force. Quite a lot of combat power just to seize kind of an off-key objective. And of course, the campaign did not go well. Despite the fact that the Union had every advantage officially, they were defeated in the Battle of Mansfield. And they were able to fend off the Confederates at Pleasant Hill, but that was enough to drive off Nathaniel Banks, and he retreated. And that was really the end of the campaign. Not much to it. 2 battles, and that's it. We're done. The naval contingent under Porter found themselves in the unpredictable Red River. And suddenly the Red River started to go down in depth. And guess what happens to your ships? They get stuck. So then he was faced with the problem of having to ditch his entire fleet. You can imagine that would be a career-ending move for him. Now, there was a little engineer that accompanied them, a lieutenant colonel by the name of Bailey, who saved the day, and we'll talk about him. We actually have some images of that. Yes, actual photos. No combat photos, but photos of saving this fleet. And that's really the story of the Red River campaign. So the Union failed, and as a result, they deprived Sherman of this very important corps that he needed for the attack on Atlanta. And even more critically, the assault on Mobile was delayed by almost 8 months. And they say that this failed Red River campaign caused the Civil War to continue on for months longer than it had to be. Yes, indeed. There's those names again. Oh, definitely. Yeah, the Civil War, when you look at how the debt changed for the United States, it definitely went through the roof. So, and that's a very great comment, Dana. And does that make more sense? Is that really what they were doing? Especially when you look at the old world structures that persist in this day to Shreveport. And, and I'm not going to say anything bad about Shreveport as a city, but yeah, there's a lot of beautiful structures there, but it has, as with many other old world cities, quite the mixed reputation, whether it's St. Louis, Kansas City, or wherever. So in any event, no, apparently not. But remember, they always did those set piece battles at that time. So in any event, so moving on, this was actually the Battle of Mansfield, and pretty set piece battle. And yet it's another example of where the Confederates, despite being badly outnumbered, managed to go on the offense and surprised Banks and defeated them. Now, General Banks had a reputation of being defeated in many of these battles, and that's what the official history says. So I strapped gators to the ironclads, turned them into walking tanks. Yeah, that's a good one, Jamie. I'm kind of surprised we don't have an account like that, do we? Anyway, so just your typical battle and nothing really to say about it. We can look at the casualties, and where you can see right here that General Banks outnumbered the Confederates, and Confederates were under the command of Dick Taylor over 2-1. But despite this, he still managed to lose the battle and took many more casualties. Kind of reminds me of that General Winder from the War of 1812, So, the guy failed, promote him. Anyways, and then the Battle of Pleasant Hill. Now, the odd thing about the Battle of Pleasant Hill is it followed the Battle of Mansfield, and these were the two major battles in the Red River campaign. And the Union won this one, but that was enough for Banks. He was calling it a retreat. And so, in any event, that was the conduct of the campaign. So, very, very suspicious and very odd. Yeah, it sure does. And we looked at that. And from what we understand, the Battle of Mobile really was decisive. I mean, that makes sense. So, structured battles until it came to burning and looting the cities. Nobody minded. And you know what the other odd thing about that is all the photographs that we have very limited photography of even artillery firing. I mean, they show them all set up, but I think there's maybe 2 or 3 images that actually show artillery firing in the Civil War. So in any event, let's take a look at some photos from this campaign exclusively. So give me 1 second here, and we'll get these photos up from the Red River campaign. And these are some very, very peculiar images, but they are stated to be real. And how we love to look at Civil War images because they're always very interesting. All right. Everybody see this line of ships here. This is the Red River campaign, levy at Alexandria. Now, this is before the Red River campaign, but this is a photo of Alexandria. This was a city or town in Louisiana that the Union Army had to go through at the time. Oh, yeah, you got it. Oh, yeah, plenty of star forts all over. So this just gives you an idea of what the Red River actually looked like. And here we have a picture of General Nathan Prentice Banks and Admiral David Dixon Porter. So what's interesting about Banks is he was one of those political generals out of Massachusetts. And Massachusetts has quite the reputation of supporting the U.S. Civil War, but the rest of New England does not. It goes back to, if you remember Ken Burns' The Civil War, the Union fought with one hand tied behind their back. That was New England not participating. Perhaps that was alluding to something else. Banks was considered militarily incompetent, but he did have a successful expedition when it came down to enforcing the blockade on Texas. But a lot of his other battles, he was known for being a failure. Maybe it's because he lacked the awesome beard. But Admiral David Dixon Porter here on the right, he did have an awesome beard, and he did have a very successful career, and he would actually ascend to the rank of admiral at the end of it. But the Red River campaign almost destroyed his career because he had to ditch his fleet. And here's another picture of old Nathaniel Prentice Banks, and of course we always have all the posing going on. Another interesting uniform there. And here we have Edmund Kirby Smith. He was the Confederate commander of the Trans-Mississippi Command, as they called it. Very interesting uniform when you look at some of the Confederate uniforms, though, and you see some of the more ornate detailing. The other thing that always gets me is when you pay attention to the hands and then some of the facial expressions. I mean, we'd expect generals to be posing for photographs. That's what they did then, and that's what they do to this day. Of course, the photography's improved, but there's always some odd peculiarities when you pay attention to the details on it. This is Richard Taylor. He was the Confederate field commander who defeated Banks so handily at Mansfield and added to the long list of Confederate commanders that defeated General Banks. But very interesting career before and after the war, and oddly enough, he seemed to take more of an active role in what was going on. And for those of you who know Louisiana to this day, some of these pictures that you're about to see are very odd. The terrain doesn't seem like it matches up, but we're assured it's in Louisiana. These are some of the Union officers, Samuel DuPont, David Dixon Porter, and Lee. But very, very odd image here. And I just thought I'd include this one because, again, you see how strange it is with the way they're arrayed and posing and how some elements of the photo just seem a little off. I'm not going to say that it's faked or anything. It just looks really strange. But what are your thoughts on it? That's right. Mutton chops. Lots of facial hair. Yeah, that's another good call out there, Calvin, looking for Hobbs. The coat looks so big on him. It's like some of the uniforms weren't always properly sized, and here we have flag officers or general officers. So what exactly is going on? It's very strange. Oh, eventually, but not directly. The Red River runs right through Texas, so in any event. But yeah, it's another one of those strange images. And now here we've looked at the river ironclads before. So this was the primary force that Admiral Porter had at his command. So these were paddle steamers that were converted to be ironclads. They built iron on the side of them. That's what the official history says. And you might recall that individual that we looked at from St. Louis, Mr. Eads, however you say his last name, he was one of the innovators of these very unique ships. And this was the first time that ironclads, ships clad in iron, were used in combat. And they had river ironclads, and they were decisive to the Union campaign in Vicksburg. However, when you look closely at them, they seem to have elements that seem a little bit more advanced, or perhaps a little, how should we say, anachronistic. I don't know. I don't want to lead anybody with what to think, but yeah, another very interesting image, though, when you look at these ironclads. Of course, we got our cannons here. Although, how exactly would you elevate those to fire outside of the river? Well, just don't think about such things, okay? I'm sure they found a way. They had a way to do it. So a couple steam stacks there, smokestacks, but good question there, Adam. Where'd all this plate iron come from? Well, apparently they were able to put it in production, and there are some accounts that they used it with their existing armories. But, again, you have to go through the logistics system. And the whole story, I might do an exploration on how they actually built these ironclads. It's very intriguing as well. Yeah, great question there. What's the antenna for? I don't know. Maybe that's how they were able to command and control, or now they call it mission command, these ironclads, as they actually had radios in them. Wouldn't that be a thought? I don't know. I mean, it does look like an antenna. I mean, we'll be told it's just a flagpole, but yeah, make of it what you will. So good to see you, Bunny One Loves. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, there you go. Don't shoot below the waterline. Thank you, sir. So I don't know. I mean, what we're told they were used for was to bombard the coast and to suppress forts and fortifications, all those star forts that everybody had in vast abundance. But it's really, really odd. Now, this was actually the dam that Lieutenant Colonel Bailey had built. And we do actually have a photo, if you can call this a photo. I guess it's a photo. So they built this makeshift dam. And the whole point of the dam was to dam up the Red River, allow the river level to come up so then they could get the beached ironclads and the rest of Admiral Porter's ships out of there so they didn't have to abandon them. Should be noted at the time that the Confederates were harassing them and wanted to seize the ships. And that could have been a decisive result to the campaign if they could. Definitely would have ended Admiral Porter's career, but Lieutenant Colonel Bailey came to the rescue. Now, what I will say about this image is I do believe that this is within the technological capability at the time as we understand it, the 1860s. This does look like some sort of haphazard dam that somebody could build, bringing in wood and actually building it up. It's not one of those lovely stone masonry constructions or very beautiful advanced concrete that we tend to see. But what are your thoughts on this dam that saved the Union fleet in the Red River campaign? Busy little beavers. That's a good one. Red River, Texas border with Oklahoma, a big rivalry at the Cotton Bowl. Yep, they still call it that to this day, don't they, Sky Sage? Yep, Red River. Oh, goodness. Net says, and yet they were working canals at the same time. Yep, well, remember, they already had the Erie Canal built, and yeah, you didn't see any cheap wood like that in the Erie Canal. No way. So, very interesting and a great comparison. So, thanks for calling that out, Annette. So, legendary. Is there any photos or documentation of airships having weapons? That'd be an interesting weapon if so. There is documentation. There's very limited photos, though. Might have to come back to that one. So, anyways, moving on past the dam. Here we have Lieutenant Colonel Bailey, who I guess got himself promoted to Brigadier General. He's kind of doing the hand thing here. Interestingly enough, he was from Wisconsin and had been involved in building dams for lumber works up there or lumber mills. Yeah, I'm not sure. Do you call this the hand in the pocket or do you just call this the three fingers in the pocket? So I don't know. Maybe he was part of the International Association of Oddfellows, not our usual suspect organization, but hard to say, hard to know. But he was the genius who came up with the plan for the dam, or so we're told. And there's several books on it where they talk about the leadership and the utter incompetence of the Union and the unbelievable competence of the Confederates. Although what's even stranger is towards the end of the Civil War, once Lee's army was defeated and the final Confederate army was defeated in South Carolina, they still had a standing army in Texas. But the official history says that in Texas, the army just sort of eroded away. They went AWOL, they deserted. They weren't into fighting anymore, which is really odd. Another thing I like to point out is you see some of the strange ships or the boats that are in these pictures. And we'll look at a couple more of them because I think that's one of the most interesting things of the Red River campaign and why I think there is an element of it that no doubt really transpired or happened. Yeah, lice. That's a good one, Kathy. Hey, Howard, thanks for joining us from Southern Mississippi. So yeah, you're familiar with the terrain. So yeah, we'll have to call it that one, Jason. The old hidden finger. Maybe that represents the International Association of Oddfellows. We always like them. So anyways, moving on. So here you got some pictures of David Dixon Porter kind of doing his thing, blocking, just hanging out as people seem to do during the Civil War, looking cool, chilling by a cannon, because what else do you do? And then this really odd picture. I'd never seen this before. So this is Admiral Porter with General Meade, the Union commander of the Army of the Potomac, the one who won the Battle of Gettysburg. I believe he was portrayed by Richard Anderson, Oscar Goldman, $6 Million Man's boss. And I think he appeared in Gettysburg for all of 10 seconds. But yeah, anyway. Strange image, though. Everybody's just kind of chilling out. There's some odd things when you pay attention to the hands. Like, when is Meade wearing gloves here or what? Sort of hard to tell. I mean, maybe he is. There's just, I don't know what it is with the older photography and a lot of the older images. And I hadn't seen this one before, and that's why I wanted to include it. Now, Admiral Porter would actually come to the top of the Union command at the end of the war. Meade would always be held back because, according to reports, Grant didn't like him. Well, you know how that goes, and that's still very true in the military to this day. If your commander doesn't like you, you're not going anywhere. I don't think there's anything controversial in saying that, but... Yeah, there you go, Chassis. Yeah, it's like they're sitting down and having tea. Yeah, maybe, Marine. I don't know. So, again, just the usual odd assortment of photos. Not really sure what's going on. Now, you might remember this individual, old General Benjamin Butler, and he was another one of these political generals. You might recall he looks like someone took Dennis Franz, the actor, and left him in the microwave on broil too long. But one, strange uniform. Two, odd things going on with the hands. I mean, I guess that kind of looks real, but what's going on here? Is he wearing a glove? I mean, it looks like this image is composited out of something. And you might remember he was called the Beast Butler. He was the Union military commander or governor of New Orleans and was not well liked there. He was also quite instrumental in putting down certain sentiments in Baltimore when they were enforcing President Lincoln's dictate of suspending habeas corpus, because just because a state remains loyal to the Union doesn't mean your rights are going to be preserved. But hey, who's judging? It was a war. They had to do what they had to do. Strange looking individual, strange looking uniform. I always used to joke that it inspired the uniforms in Star Trek: The Next Generation. Now we'll look at some more of the boats, and we can see some of the paddle steamer technology here, but we have some better images. And oddly enough, look at the nature of the terrain, though. That's what always interests me, because remember, this is Louisiana, and if you've been to Louisiana, does Louisiana ever look like this? I mean, maybe it does, but hard to tell sometimes, doesn't it? They are old vessel standard uniforms. Oh, that's a good one, Isabella. That's a good one. Jesse James from Missouri. Yeah, that's true. And funny you bring him up, Sky Sage, because Quan Trill, who was also operating in Missouri, Quan Trill's Raiders, he would actually, two of his former members would be the one who would kill Colonel Bailey later. So, yeah, it is awfully built up, isn't it? And seems to defy the expectations that you would expect to see, doesn't it? So, in any event, let's look at some more. So here again, looking at these paddle steamers, and just the terrain is always strange to me. Always looking very desiccated and destroyed. I've been to Louisiana many times, and I mean, maybe, but for me, it's like being anywhere in the river valley, the Mississippi River Valley. You look at the older pictures, and the terrain always looks very desiccated, destroyed, arid. Like here, especially. And this is supposed to be Alexandria, so a town in Louisiana off of the Red River. But very bizarre, very peculiar, and something we see a lot of. And I mean, look at what we got going on back here. It's a pretty advanced structure. Oh, maybe another one of those retaining walls. Is that all made out of limestone too? But again, it always defies your expectations. I mean, maybe these are wooden buildings, but these don't seem to be. So odd things to see. And then this is a picture of the dam when they were intentionally breaking it. And this caused the water to flow and enable them to rescue the ironclads. Yeah, concrete, always to be seen where there shouldn't be concrete, right? What do we got, Dana? Yes, there's a petrified forest in Florida, Mississippi, and it is close to the Louisiana border. Okay, so it is reasonable the terrain could look like that. Makes sense. Well, reasonable explanation. I got it. Looks like the Sooner Doper Martin fallout. Yeah, I suppose it kind of does, doesn't it? So... yeah, working their way up or working their way down. I mean, the Mississippi comes right down from Dubuque. So it's all very peculiar how these things connect. So East Texas had several missions moved to San Antonio. So very true. We're going to be exploring San Antonio soon, Sky Sage. Yes, we are. Yeah, it seems like a lot of people had Roman concrete back then, didn't they? So anyways, moving on. Rear Admiral Porter's fleet above the falls at Alexandria. And so here you can get kind of an idea of some of the river ironclads and what it must have been like for them to try to maneuver up the Red River. Not exactly the best photo. Here we've got 12-pounder deck guns on wheeled carriages. So a little different firing configuration. So maybe they could elevate those. Just thought I'd show that, because I'm trying to consider all angles. This is a very peculiar looking ironclad. I mean, it looks like we got a monitor turret on this one. It really does look like something that's laying low in the water. Almost like you got a combination between the ships of the Merrimack and the Monitor, or the CSS Virginia and the USS Monitor. Really odd one. I hadn't seen anything quite like this. Thoughts on this one? I don't know. I mean, maybe, Jason. It's hard to say. I get the feeling, though, that some of these have a little bit more reality to them. I don't know why, but, that's just a feeling. I could be wrong. I wasn't there. I don't know. So, Louisiana and Mississippi get a little hilly the more north you go. Near Windsor Ruins are deep ravines. Civil War battles took place in that area. Must have been a heck of a place to fight, too, with that kind of terrain. So, yeah, I think so, Legendary. Semi-submersible. And remember, we had the first Union Navy submarine, the USS Alligator, we looked at on the Civil War technology video. So Quite convenient. The Great Raft occurred 175 miles of the Red River until the late 1830s when it was cleared just in time for the Civil War, but gotten jammed back up with logs by 1870. Yes. Another one of those little details. Good one there, American RN. Great one to call out, too. People on film interviews who were there and remember at least some of these things. Potentially. But I mean, what are we really looking at? That's always the question we have to ask. I'll say this, every time I see the video or the film footage of the old Civil War veterans talking, I'm always amazed at how young they look, or at least how active they look, and then how articulate they are. It's very impressive. Maybe atom bomb were the cannons actually sound weapons? They could have been. More advanced technology? That would probably make more sense. That would sort out that elevation issue, wouldn't it? So, all good, Cynthia. Good to see you. Let's take a look at a few more. So again, we see more of these unique boat types here, and here you get more of this feeling of this partially submerged boat. Now, you could just say, yeah, that was the nature, and that's how they were designed, and that's how they best operated on the river, but a lot of problems with this campaign. And I was amazed at some of these images that you could find. So this was the USS Osage, and I had never really seen a boat. I'll call it a boat. I mean, you could call it a ship, but, it's a modified paddle steamer. Who knows what the heck this is? Some recovered technology that was repurposed? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, just very, very strange when you look at this, especially this turret on the front. I mean, yeah, this looks like the classic monitor turret. Looks like they got a couple cannons here, a couple cannons there. I don't know. If they were frequency weapons, would that make more sense? And again, same problem. How exactly would you elevate these? Well, you're just fighting other boats on the river, and that's all you're really going to do. Okay, then what's the point if you're supporting an army expedition? You kind of need to fire over the riverbanks. You need to elevate to do that. But, that's just me. Maybe there's something I'm not seeing. Maybe they had carriages. I could try to give them the benefit of the doubt. This is a really interesting one because you can see a little bit more of the detail on what they had. And it's when you see things like this, you get the impression that this operation that's supposed to be a military operation feels a lot more, how shall we say, hasty, that there's not all the planning that went into it. Because remember, we're informed that Admiral Porter himself wanted space on these boats to pick up all the cotton bales, right? Well, they look already packed, so I'm not really sure. Archimedes' principle. Yeah, no doubt about it. Looks like a flotilla, so. Good question, Dan, man. I mean, what they tell us is that they repurposed them really quickly. They were paddle steamers. They put the iron on it, and I don't think it took them that long. I'd have to go back and reference that, how long it actually took them to do it. So, well, did they weld them? Did they actually bolt them? I mean, anything they did, and we looked at it back at the Civil War technology video, seemed to be rather pushing it for the time, but we're informed they did. So, oh, that's a good one, Reality Checkmate. Yeah, it does have a bit of a hovercraft vibe to it, doesn't it? So, yes. Yeah, that's that has been stated, Chassis, although it's contested as well, but who knows? Anyways. So here you have the USS Pittsburgh. Yeah, no combat photos, no real photos of the Army. We've got some very dramatic drawings of the Army, but interesting here with the flag. We got plenty of photos of the naval expedition. And then here's another photo of the dam after they burst it. So really actual photographic evidence of the dam, photographic evidence of a fleet, or at least boats on a river, and a lot of personnel operating with them. Now, the official history says the Union Army actually had to guard the ironclads, the river flotilla, when they were stuck until Colonel Bailey's amazing plan got them out of their quandary. So this is the last image that we have, but very interesting images. And it definitely gives a different set of perceptions for what's really going on. I mean, was it simply a naval flotilla that was supporting an ill-advised campaign? And it should be noted that Admiral Porter said this campaign was a bad idea, but went along with it anyway, because you know how it goes. You don't say no when someone says you're going to do something, especially in the military. But really, really odd. Conflicting images, conflicting accounts. I mean, could this have been some sort of refugee operation? Could this have been larger scale, more, how shall we say, international operation to remove resistance on the Red River? Was there something else they were going after in Shreveport? All are possibilities. Yeah, there you go. Let's break the dam and stand on it for a photo. That couldn't possibly go wrong, could it? Yeah, and that's a good comment there, Reality Checkmate. Scouting the ruins. That's kind of the feeling that you get with it. So, in any event, so the campaign ends in disaster. We'll take a look at real quick at some of the sketches. Although, anybody can do sketches. They don't necessarily prove things, but just give an idea of what people were looking at for the campaign. We do actually have some artwork of what Bailey's really cool plan looked like. So we'll go to present, share screen, and here we go. So again, just the sketches that give you an idea. Now, interestingly enough, we didn't really see any boats that were around. Supposedly one of the boats was waiting for the dam to break so they could make their run and have the river deep enough so they could actually float. So this is just one of the drawings. And then here's another one that shows Alexandria with Porter's fleet steaming on by. And then Mansfield's not Mansfield's army, but Banks's army marching on by. All 30,000 of them, 35,000 of them, or however many it actually was. Maybe it was many more. So it's really odd to commit this many resources when even the Union, which had a great manpower advantage, so we're told, decided to do this little diversion and not continue focusing on defeating the primary armies of the Confederacy. That's probably the most strangest aspect of this particular campaign and why you could say it ended in disaster. So what they inform us is that the water had originally been 18 feet deep, but then it abruptly went shallow and went under 9 feet down to 6 feet, and then in some places 3 feet. And that's why they grounded the river ironclads. That's what the official account says. Now, what really happened, I don't know. So, yeah, exactly. And that's the other peculiar thing, Reality Checkmate. No photos even of the Union Army marching, just drawings. So, very, very odd and strange. Now, here we actually have this was the Battle of Pleasant Hill. And so this followed Mansfield. And this is the one where the Union Army did a little bit better, but Banks had enough. And again, your standard Civil War combat image, if you will, a nice drawing. It is a drawing of a battle, as Johnny Depp would say. And then here, another picture. I guess well-wishers from Alexandria had nothing better to do, and they decided to come watch this dam. Now, while they were constructing this dam, they informed us that this was not going to be successful. Everybody was betting on the fact that the ironclads were going to be stuck and the Confederates were going to capture them. But this Hail Mary plan from Colonel Bailey just happened to work. And then again, another one of the drawings. Although what I will say about this drawing is it does seem to capture a few more of the ships based on what we saw in the photograph. So maybe something more accurate in this drawing. Hard to say, hard to know. And then, of course, this image. I always found this one interesting because what exactly is going on in the background here? Just a lot of cloud cover? Not really sure. Nobody on the coast here, just the dam, and kaboom, out she goes. And the Union fleet managed to make their escape and withdrew back to Mississippi. And Admiral Porter's career was saved. Happy faces for all. But it's just, you really think of this and you think of how much they rely on sketches and paintings to display the battles. And so I think that's the reason why things are peculiar. Of course, everyone will say, well, they couldn't take combat photos. The exposure time was too long. But they could get photos of the Grand Army Pass and Review in Washington, D.C. towards the end of the conflict. And there are numerous accounts of people sitting up on ridge lines watching battles. So I find it very problematic that they couldn't get combat photos. I find that a difficult thing to reconcile. But a lot of people, makes lots of sense to them. Yeah, dam looked nothing like the picture. You had to make it look a little bit better. So what's so civil about war anyways? Well, I guess it just sounds good, Brother Adam. I guess it just sounds good. So. Well, and I'm glad you say that about the artist chassis, because here's the other thing to remember. You might recall those campaign maps and all those battle plans that we were looking at. Those weren't composed contemporaneously. In other words, those weren't conducted during the battle. They were drawn after the fact. And that's a reality. The Civil War battle maps, especially the ones that Ken Burns used in his Civil War TV series, they were done for the TV series. Now, yes, we're told they were done off of official maps that the Smithsonian has, but make of that what you will. So, cotton at the time, that's what they said, and that's what they were going after. Yeah, the whole thing is really peculiar. It just does not pass the sense test. I mean, the campaign failed, even if it succeeded. It had the Union out of position to finish winning the war. It didn't change anything. Yeah, exactly. As though that's what you were doing. You were just playing chess. Once you capture the king, the war is over. And it's kind of odd because the way they facilitated the conflict with going after both Washington and Richmond, that's kind of how they acted. I mean, Richmond fell and the war still wasn't over. It wasn't until the Army of Northern Virginia surrendered. And then in South Carolina, the remaining Confederate Army there surrendered. So make of it what you will. And, here's another picture of Banks's army advancing. So again, just your drawn picture. We got a lot of wagons, we got horses, we got infantry marching, any army from any time in history. Yep. So nothing really documented here, but nice picture. Now for this last image, this is the actual plan for the dam that was presented by, I like this, Brevet Brigadier General J. Bailey. I guess he promoted himself. They say it in the historical documents that he was still a lieutenant colonel, but you can just promote yourself. Anyways, interesting though that there is more detail with this. Whenever they actually did this drawing, is this really what he did? Is this from that time frame? Maybe it might be. Maybe there's a little bit more to this dam story, that they really had to get a fleet out of there for reasons we don't really know. But oddly enough, Brevet Brigadier General Bailey met with an untimely demise because later he became a sheriff in Missouri and was going after Quantrill's raiders, had captured them, and then opted not to disarm them. And then they killed him. That's what the official history says. But he was smart enough to come up with this amazing plan for the dam. So as I'm fond of saying, make of it what you will. But I do find it interesting that we have better plans for this dam than we do for many of the buildings, state capitals, other structures all across, the great star forts, the forts, whatever. So yeah, the dam was the end all be all. To get rid of the one with the dinosaurs in them. Yeah, no doubt about it. All right. Anyways. So let's look at the last aspect about what really drove this campaign, the French in Mexico. And then we'll look at the miracles of Puebla. And that's probably the most interesting thing about this whole thing. So transition here. French intervention in Mexico. Now, I'm well aware, and I remember talking about this to other historians and professors and so forth. I'm amazed at how few people are actually aware of the French intervention in Mexico. So the United States always had the Monroe Doctrine, where basically the United States acted like it owned North and South America and said no European powers would intervene. Well, with the United States Civil War going on, Napoleon III, yes, from that Napoleon, decided that he was going to intervene in Mexico, and he was going to establish a new ruler in Mexico. And this went on from 1861 to 1862. And this shaded area that you see here, this was the occupied terrain. Now, it should be noted that the legitimate Mexican government resisted this. Now, what the big threat was that some people speculate that the Red River Campaign was about, so that was way up here, was that the Confederates were going to recognize this government. And this is going to create a big problem, even though actually getting supplies and supporting the Confederates anyway would have been very problematic because all the terrain, and if you're familiar with northern Mexico, it's not exactly the easiest place to move an army or supplies across. I mean, you can do it, but it's not very easy. And remember, the Union Navy was blockading all of Texas and Louisiana at that time. They really couldn't have supported the Confederacy anyway. So again, very peculiar. But how many people even knew or were aware of the French intervention in Mexico? I'm kind of curious. Only knew this because some places there speak French. That's a good point, Chassis. And it is something I will say that people in the South, especially Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, seem to be more aware of. But when you go up to the north, the northern states, especially when you talk about, you talk to anybody from Europe, for some reason, they don't really talk about the French intervention in Mexico. Yeah, and I would probably say 95% of my students, they'd never heard of it either. It happened during the United States Civil War. If you're in the United States, all you care about was the Civil War. Oh, look at that. Sky Sage leaning ahead in the foxhole. Maximilian. Yeah, we'll get to him in a second. So, well, there was another time that they were involved, but it's really hard to say. The second French intervention is interesting because they actually got so far as to establish an entire government there. So we'll do an exploration on the first. It's just I'm not going to get into that right now because that creates a lot of other questions. So, anyways, now here's where things get crazy. So the belligerents. Now you see this ended in a Mexican Republican victory. That was the original Republic of Mexico. They were supported by the United States. Yes, this was the same United States that only a few decades earlier had invaded Mexico. But, they still recognized their sovereignty. But France set up the Mexican Empire. That was their phony state, if you will. But they were supported by, get this, Spain, the United Kingdom, Austria, Belgium, Egypt, and Polish exiles. Very strange. And then you can even see some of the leaders here. So Napoleon III from France. Benito Juarez, he was the commander of the Mexican Republic. And then this other individual, Porfirio Diaz, he would come up with the Porfiriano in Mexico afterwards. So a couple leaders that would become famous in Mexican history. And then down here, you have good old Maximilian. And you notice there's a skull and crossbones next to his name. So he did not meet a good end. But isn't this odd? All these nations, this almost seems like it's some kind of, I don't know, what we think of in modern terms as a, dare I say, UN intervention. Look at this. France, Spain, United Kingdom, Austria, Belgium, Egypt, Polish exiles, all going to Mexico to set up this intervention in this government, this satellite government. Does this make any sense, or do you think this is something else going on? Oh, yeah. Very, very strange, especially when you look at all these nations that are involved. And I'd even forgotten about this because they call it the French intervention. But no, this wasn't just the French intervention. So what's really going on? Did the European powers say, well, the Americans are involved in their civil war, so now's our chance to intervene and get involved and screw the Monroe Doctrine? Oh, yeah. Yes, especially with that Belgium part, right? Very peculiar, isn't it? Oh, yes. Well, and that's kind of the impression you get. Now, think about this. Look at the U.S. Civil War differently. Is this what was really going on with the U.S. Civil War? Was this some sort of massive expeditionary force that was being supported, commanded elsewhere, and they were really establishing something? Or was it already going on and they were just finishing things up? Because remember, from 1860 to 1880, there was conflict all over North America. Because even after the U.S. Civil War, you still had the Plains Indians Wars, as they called it. You also had the Fenian raids when Irish went to Canada to try to attack Canada. Now they failed. But isn't it intriguing that long before World Wars, we had conflicts all over North America, Central America, Mexico, United States, Canada. Everybody was getting in on it. Yeah, maybe Sky Sage. And I think this is yet more evidence that shows that. Yes, Irish invasion of Canada. It did happen. It happened during the Grant administration, no less. Anyways. So this is Maximilian of Mexico. He was I don't know if you want to call him the puppet emperor that was set up there, but oddly enough, he was from Austria. We even explored the palace he was born in when we did the Vienna exploration. But he was the individual and had some wondrous facial hair, so, he could have served perfectly well as a Union or a Confederate general. Maybe an effective Union general, except for Burnside's. But things didn't go so well for him. Eventually, they lost. He was seized, and he was executed, apparently at point-blank range by firing squad here. So very, very peculiar. Very interesting set of historical events. But even more interesting is this town of Puebla. We haven't really covered it yet, but we're looking at some architectural examples of new bark again. And look at this. This is a biblioteca, a library that's still there. And isn't this impressive? Yeah, don't ever underestimate what you're going to find in Mexico. Some incredible examples of architecture. And we've got a real doozy we're going to take a look at, such as the Capella or the Chapel of Rosario, the eighth wonder of the world. This is in Puebla. And we'll take a closer look at this. But what do you think of this? Wonder exactly how they did that. They tell us they constructed this in 1690. Yeah, the things you could do in 1690. Yep, that's right. Mexico. Don't sleep on it. Don't overlook it. They'll call it new bark or bark, Dan man, bark, but whatever that means. Yeah, 1690. Look, who needs heavy machinery? Who needs roads? Who needs a railroad even? You could build this without that, apparently. So, yeah, it does look like something Indiana Jones would be in. Anyway, we'll take a closer look at it. But here's the Cathedral of Puebla, very impressive cathedral. And remember, Puebla was featured prominently in this French intervention. And then here's the church at the mountain's foot. Isn't this gorgeous? I mean, almost like you're in some kind of fairy tale land. Well, this is in Mexico. You can go see this to this day. Nice domes. Very, very impressive. So, yeah, get a little architecture in here. So, pure work ethic, just like the Home Depot parking lot. Now, and step back and look at this. If this is all connected, and the official historical account tells us this is all connected, this Red River campaign was to keep this government from supporting the Confederacy. What if there was something else going on? What if that really was the concern? Were there really some enclaves that were still resisting that this series of forces, this expedition was really targeting? Because what ultimately makes a lot more sense? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Wars in Northern Europe as well. And it was incessant conflict going on too. And they try to catalog it all under saying, it was social unrest and eventually the nobility, the aristocracy, the monarchy gave in to all these reforms. That's what the official history says, but who knows? All I can say, Dan, is no idea. No idea how they did it or why they did it. It's all very interesting. And so here you can actually see the entrance of the French Expeditionary Force. And I guess we have some French here in Mexico. And yeah, amazing how old everything looks already. Because it is. But hard to imagine them even building anything like that during this time. One of these elaborate paintings. So, and then another look at San Francisco and Puebla. And look at some of the detail on this. I always really appreciate the coloring on this too. Just gorgeous. Now, do we think anybody could build something like this today? Anywhere? Maybe in Dubai? I just had to throw that out there. Kind of hard to imagine anybody building this today. Oh, there you go, Kathy. You'll have to invite us over sometime. I'd love to see it. Then the detail on this little palace here. Palacio de Gobierno, if I'm pronouncing that properly. Look, sometimes I get mixed up with French and Spanish, so don't hold it against me. But wondrous detail on this. Probably built this, in the 1500s. I didn't get the completion date on the palace, but again, all over the place. Mexico, United States, all over South America, Europe, Africa, Asia. You'll find it. Anybody do anything like this today? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. And then, of course, here we have the siege of Puebla, and this was during the French intervention. And again, oddly enough, you see how impressive these structures are. I mean, look at, you have these domes, wrecked dome here. I mean, what's really going on here? Are they actually depicting some genuine events in this painting? I wonder. Yeah, who knows, Dan? I mean, limestone or maybe even something more advanced. Soldiers are too busy building star forts to fight. Yeah, ones that seemed a little useless when this all went down, isn't it? So, oh, very true. Very true. Don't want to forget Guatemala, Nicaragua. I mean, they all have examples there too. I mean, it's everywhere. Yeah, Sky Sage. And then even more interesting is that many of that still exists. So anyway, I got a few more images because I'm not going to leave you hanging on that. Because I thought we'd take a closer look at this chapel. And I got several images of the chapel. Now, this really has to be seen to be believed because, I mean, this is really otherworldly. And I had never seen this before. I mean, look at the detail on this. Just incredible. I mean, how exactly do you form that? How exactly do you construct that to where you have such beautiful geometry, but then even the coloring? Now, it should be noted this chapel was a candidate for the eighth wonder of the world. That's what the official history even says. Yeah, I mean, I've never really seen anything like this. Well, the official architecture style they'll give us on it, Tia, is that it's bark. But to answer your question, I don't know. Could be any, could be all. Yeah, exactly. And just a reminder, please hit that like button. Don't worry, we got plenty more. But I mean, I've never quite seen anything like this. We've seen a lot of incredible interiors as we've done all our explorations over the last year on the channel. I mean, this one, I agree. I mean, this really is one of the most stupendous interiors I've ever seen in Puebla, Mexico. Just impressive. I mean, as gorgeous as the Vatican looks, as gorgeous as St. Peter looks on the inside, I mean, you can see why this is something that exceeds it. Oh, yeah, they have catacombs too that they found under Puebla because why not? Why wouldn't you have catacombs too? That's another one of those things. And then integrating pyramids too, because, as we said, they built on top of the pyramids. So many different interesting things. Here's another one of the chapel. And here you can see a little bit more of the coloring behind it just to see all the detail. And I've got to say, I've never quite seen anything like this. Yeah, that's a good one, Donna Marie. Angkor Wat style. I mean, really, how do you describe it? How do you really appreciate it? It would be amazing if we could, but I don't even see anybody trying to, how shall we say, counterfeit this today. I really don't think we could, but that's just me. I could be wrong. Yeah, I really wonder how much time it would take. Whew. I wonder who does clean that every day. Oh, yes, our good friend Gowdy. Well, he's not involved in this one, Sky Sage, but yeah, let's look at some more. Here's a little better one showing you the altar. I mean, look at the altar. I mean, very unique and very intricate. We've seen plenty of altars, but this is just something that is totally otherworldly. It's about the only way I can describe it. And that you're really looking at something that's some sort of remnant from a distant civilization. I mean, are we really going to believe they did it in 1690? How? I would love to know. I would love to even hear theories. I'll entertain any theories that anybody may have. How they could have done it. How would we do it now? I mean, and the different angles. I mean, look at this. And this is real. You can find lots of on-site footage of this. I mean, this isn't a mock-up. This isn't a model. This exists to scale with all this detail. And of course, we got Mr. Sun up there. Very, very odd. Not what we'd expect for our traditional Catholic chapel, is it? Yeah, maybe they did. I'm almost under the impression, Sky Sage, that this has to combine everything. I mean, everything that we have in theories and maybe even something beyond it. So, yeah, I'm about at that point myself, Old World Hastings. The power of belief. That's what did it. So, good one, Christopher Allen. We do it with plaster today and paint it. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. Probably wouldn't hold up, though. Start to fall apart as soon as you finish painting it. Anyway. Now, this is the exterior of the chapel, so a little bit more subtle. Still impressive, but subtle compared to what we just looked at. But then you contrast that with here in the interior. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's not something you can easily explain, but you can see it. And so it's where you have to come and make that decision. Do you really accept the official history as it's given to us, or is there another explanation? Is there something else going on? Well, when you see structures like this, that's something you really have to ask those hard questions on. Because anybody doing this at any time frame in history seems unlikely at best. Beautiful. They put worn in where it counts. Yeah. I mean, no idea. We had time, maybe, but they keep us trapped on a monetary treadmill. Yeah. And even then, Cynthia, I just don't know. It's too hot outside, so all work was done inside. Yeah, that's a good one, Adam. That might be an explanation. So, no, they'd tell us it wouldn't, and that's why they had to tear it down. Really, to me, it's impressive the structure still stands. You can still see it. So, yeah, here you can get another idea of the detail. Looking up into the dome here. Just all this intricacy, and yet it all seems to flow together very organically. So I don't know. I mean, is it showing some other form of architecture? Is it showing the absolute pinnacle of technology? And this was the last surviving example? I mean, maybe. You don't just call it the eighth wonder of the world for no reason. Yeah, exactly, Dwayne. Well, and who would have ever thought that U.S. Civil War Red River campaign would end up in Mexico? But that's what we're told it was officially focused on. So, uh, yeah, it does kind of give some H.R. Giger vibes, doesn't it? Yeah, I'd agree with that. Well, that could be true too. Definitely, right now it's a period from when time didn't exist. That much is certain. Let's see what else we've got on this one. And so here is the nearby Santo Domingo Church. I believe that's what it's called. I might have messed up the name on it, but still impressive. And again, in Puebla, Mexico. Rivals anything that you have in Europe. 1690, I guess. Not really sure. And again, looking at the top of that altar with all the detailing on that. Impressive as well. And here's where you can see some of the other coloring behind it. And I think that's the thing you don't always see. I mean, you think it's all gold, but it's not. There's many different color schemes that go into it. And again, color schemes that change with the natural lighting. So once again, showing signs of more of an advanced technology, more of an advanced awareness of aesthetics and light, something that we certainly don't show. I mean, the closest we come to it is when you have one of those nice glass skyscrapers that's reflecting a little differently in the sun. But I mean, look at the color scheme on this. Yeah, lost in the language is absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, I would love to get an idea of when it actually happened. I would love to know the true chronology, but I mean, I think the best we're going to do is come up with theories and get close to it. So, and then here's another image where I think you get an idea of how the light affects it. I mean, looking in the background and the detail here. I mean, really, I think I could just hang out here all morning and look at this and just observe every detail. Well, maybe you're the kind of person that could just walk by this and not notice or just think, yeah, it was easy. They did it in 1690. It all makes sense. Yeah, maybe. Don't think anything less of you if that's what you think. I just find it interesting if that's what you think. Because to me, this is something that, I mean, if someone was going to tell me that there was something that they filmed some sort of science fiction movie and some sort of long lost or futuristic building, this is something that I would buy. I think it'd be like the perfect set. Not that I'm disrespecting any of the religious meanings to the building or its position in Mexico. It's just going off the appearance of it alone. And then here you have a little bit more of the, dare I say, lighter side of the way the light shines in. I mean, I would love to see the specific times listed within this chapel and how the light's affecting it and what's really lighting it up and when it appears more gold or more of the white tone. It's very, very intriguing. What is it really made out of? I have no idea. And I bet if I was there and I could actually interact with it, I still wouldn't have any closer idea. Good question, Mega Death Giver. No idea. Might have to look into that and see if we can get some theories on it. Yeah, maybe. Well, could well be. Any and every theory is as valid as any other because right now, I don't know. I have not taken that off the table either. Yeah, that could be. Yeah, it does seem to be that way. And we don't know. Maybe. That's a good question, Jamie. I'll have to check into that. I wouldn't be surprised. And then again, very modest exterior. No, this is just the church that's right next to it. And then I think we'll end on this particular image. So anyway, to close out the exploration, what do you think the Red River Campaign was truly about now that we've looked at these extraordinary structures in Puebla, Mexico, and we've talked about this French or seems to be European intervention in Mexico? I mean, yeah, we'll say the French, but what are your thoughts? I mean, what was the campaign really about? Was it just some Civil War campaign that went awry because they put an incompetent general with a competent admiral and things just blew up? Or was there a lot more to it? Were they really after different objectives? Were they really concerned about what was going on? Was there some sort of effort to actually gain control of certain structures in certain areas? Yeah, and I think we have a lot of evidence that's what was going on, conquering, a purge, because this always involved people. And I think that's what's really peculiar. It's also really strange to me how Texas just seemed to erode away, even though no Union armies actually invaded Texas. It wasn't until after they surrendered and said, okay, that's enough. We call it. Send your occupation forces. Really? 4 years of Civil War and then, okay, we're done. It's just really strange. Yeah, exactly, Julie. And I think those are some of the most incredible structures that we have. So maybe they were modified on the outside. Who knows? Yeah, I think so. And I think they were after the knowledge as well. And then the ability to convey the knowledge on it. Yeah, I've got to say, I mean, I can definitely buy off on the eighth wonder of the world. So, anyways, because I appreciate all of you and I appreciate y'all being here, I will make sure that I get some images of this incredible chapel posted up on the community page of the channel so you can look at it at your discretion and appreciate it. And I think that's what we can really come to about the entire Red River campaign, that there was a lot more to it. It was about conquering. It was about controlling the people. Hey, Lori, thanks for joining us. It's all good. Yeah, clearly a diversion story. A diversion story to make us think that there were multiple conflicts going on with multiple different objectives, when in reality there was only one overall conflict going on, and there was really two singular objectives: control, conquering, and then starting off on the old pattern of assimilation and indoctrination. So, in any event, yeah, the wooden pews. We got gold on the ceilings and wooden pews. No doubt about it. Yeah, I'm with Brother Atom Bomb here. All I know is I don't know. So anyway, if you have the means and you're inclined, there are many great things to see in Mexico. And you don't have to go to just the great resorts. And this is a pretty nice area in Mexico still to this day. So, not that I'm pushing for the tourism project there, but, the old world can be seen everywhere. Oh, there's a good comment there. Yeah. And I think there's actually a lot to be said for that because of the whole mission of seizing the cotton bales. Well, they're probably after something a little bit more than cotton. So, well, good. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. All right. Well, I think that's all we have. And just ask you to hit that like button before you go, and appreciate everybody supporting the channel. Appreciate you showing up for the exploration and sharing your comments and your thoughts. And they're wonderful comments and thoughts. And they help drive my own as we continue for understanding what happened in times past, because it's clear we're still putting it all together. So I hope you enjoyed this exploration, and as promised, I'll make sure I get these images posted on the channel community page. And we're going to have a full schedule of explorations coming up this week, and I'll be sure to let you know once we get back to the next live stream. It'll be coming soon. I think you're going to like it. So in any event, thank you for joining. Hey, Kitch, good to see you. And everybody have a great week. And this is Lucius Aurelian signing off.